Hey, I am the Rocketeer Lady, MK Smith, and welcome to the Delta V podcast. This podcast is devoted to highlighting and amplifying women and other minority voices in the STEM industry, not only highlighting their professional paths and their STEM career, but also pulling back the curtain to showcase the amazing, diverse people that make up this industry. We are here to smash the traditional and hopefully provide some tips and laughs along the way. From pageant crowns to astronaut helmets, Paramita Mitra truly breaks the mold for what most define as the stereotypical engineer, which is why she was the obvious perfect choice for our first guest of this series. Paramita was born in Bangladesh and immigrated with her family to the United States at 5 years old. From a young age, STEM has been a driving passion that set her on a space trajectory. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in aerospace engineering from Mississippi State University and currently works at NASA Johnson Space Center as the principal investigator for the NextGen Spacesuit Head-up display. That was a mouthful. Paramita and I started freshman year of aerospace engineering together at Mississippi State and have been through it. Paramita, thank you so much for coming on and discussing the good, the bad, the ugly of your STEM journey. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. It's so good to be here today. So, a lot of you might know her as Mary Kate, but as besties, I call her Kate. So good to be here. And I'm so excited that you're starting this YouTube journey, and I'm so honored to be your first guest.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tried to give kind of an overview, but obviously there's a lot more to Paramita than what my little brief intro was. Can you give us like a brief summary of the project that you're currently working on at NASA and leading?
Just to give you bird's eye view, I'm at NASA Johnson in Houston, Texas. So that is NASA's primary human spaceflight center. And so mission control is there, and we also build the spacesuit there. So I'm on the Exploration EMU or the XEMU team, and that's NASA's next gen suit. And on that team, there's a component called the displays and controls. That is essentially a dynamic display that the crew's going to start using for future EVAs or spacewalks, otherwise known as spacewalks. And so my job is as the lead engineer for that display and control that will go in the helmet. And so I lead a project specifically to develop a near eye augmented reality display. There's a team of about 28 of us working on that. And so it's absolutely my dream job. It's what I did my research in graduate school. And as a principal investigator, I kind of act as the project manager as well as guiding a lot of the science goals and the kind of the trajectory that we're going to take and the development path. So there's a lot of optics involved, a lot of electrical engineering involved, everything from biomed and understanding the biomechanics of the head and the suit to the software and the optics involved. So it kind of runs the gamut of a lot of different disciplines, but it's a super exciting project, and absolutely, yeah, love what I do at work.
Yeah, that's wild. It's so involved, and I've always been so inspired by your journey that you've been on. And because I know, but I know our audience doesn't, how did you get involved with this project? Obviously, we probably have people listening that are pursuing aerospace or want to find cool projects that you're working on. You said that you've been doing what you're working on now since college. How did you end up finding this project?
Sure thing. So, Kate, like in aerospace engineering, it's a very difficult path. Like, we're definitely not taking a major, we're not pursuing a major as an aerospace engineer that is, I guess, easy. In a sense of the word, at Mississippi State, the aerospace engineering program is one of the degree programs that have the highest amount of hours. And so I think it was like us and architecture, we had like a lot of just dedicated hours in the first place. And then the classes are also, it's literally rocket science. So I think going down the path of aerospace engineering at Mississippi State, undergrad was, you're really just trying to get your baseline and you're trying to get your baseline skills. So you're taking your traditional classes and structures and mechanics. You're taking all of your physics, all of your calculuses up to beyond all the calculuses. You take differential equations. So you have a really solid math background, a really solid structural mechanics and structures background, I think, in the aerospace program. And you're really just getting your baseline. I think one of my favorite classes, orbital mechanics. And so in undergrad, you're just getting all of those courses down and you're establishing yourself as an engineer.
Going
And
through it.
Right. And so I think like when we decided to go to graduate school, because we were in the graduate program around the same time, I think you were like a year ahead of me. In our program, it was very flexible on your research topic, right? And so, yeah, to get to your question about how I got to this field of study, I love aerospace. I also really thought myself of going down the medical path. My father's a medical doctor and a public health professor, and it's the human body is really fascinating. And so there was, this part of me that wanted to understand humans in aerospace. I was interning at NASA Marshall after my senior year so I already graduated undergrad, and I was looking around for research topics because I knew that I was going to enter a grad program at Mississippi State, and I had that flexibility to kind of study what I wanted because I was funded by a NASA fellowship. And so I had just honestly reached out and was just really looking into all different kinds of fields. I was looking at guidance, navigation, and control, GNC, looking at, autonomous satellites, CubeSats. And then I also kind of stumbled upon the spacesuit world. And I didn't really conceptualize that people actually build the suit at NASA. When I kind of started to realize all of the skill sets you needed to understand how the human body works and functions in this one single spacecraft or vehicle, which is the spacesuit, I just thought it was fascinating because you really have to understand the human system itself. So that incorporates understanding and quantifying anthropometry to be able to design to that. I just found this world of engineering in human systems integration and humans in aerospace that kind of combined my love for all things aerospace, but also the human aspect. I thought was super interesting. I, reached out to one of the lead engineers on the suit. Her name is Amy Ross, and I asked her, like, what needs to be done? What are the questions you guys have that you could use a free grad student on? And honestly,
So you just reached out to her, you saw somebody who was doing something that you were interested in, and you just
yeah,
shot your, shoot your shot.
I shot my shot.
Shot my shot.
And so I sent her an email, and I spent like probably 40 minutes just coming up with the email, and it was pretty short, but just told them my interest, and then also just mentioned that I'm a free grad student who can pursue some of these efforts, and you don't have to like really worry about incorporating me into your payment process or anything like that. So I think that helped, but also just like sending that email, and I'm so lucky that she was receptive and sent me a response and put me in connection with other people. Yeah, I just am really thankful because she, was a female mentor in my life, albeit a very short amount of time. She still introduced me to like fascinating topics and real problems that needed to get done that also positioned me well for, coming on as a full-time hire. It was pretty straightforward. I just reached out to the person I saw doing something I wanted and asked them what type of problems I could solve.
I think it's so interesting too that, like, I think we are in a world where people, at least in college, we were told like networking is so important. You need to talk and reach out to people and not
Yeah,
be afraid, And I think I love that story because I think it really shows how just shoot that email. Show if you're genuinely interested in someone's work or you're genuinely interested in that research, most of the time they're interested at least talking to you. And then
right.
sometimes even cooler things will come out, like projects that follow
Yeah.
you to your professional career, which I think is really
Mhm.
awesome.
Absolutely. And that networking piece, like I think watching you do it in undergrad and grad school also helped a lot. Um, Especially, our aerospace tailgates, at
Yeah.
Mississippi State were such a microcosm of professors and people in
Yeah.
the professional industry. And I know you and I always made a point to go, but that's where I met one of my lifelong female mentors, Carrie Olson, Dr. Carrie
Hmm.
Olson, and she was a prior professor at Mississippi State. So I think you also know her pretty well as too, Mary Kate. She was a prior professor at Mississippi State and then a branch chief at NASA Marshall at the time that I had met her. And I believe she's now doing a headquarters rotation. And she, I met her over mimosas at a
Right.
tailgate. And so she really, saw something in me and gave me the opportunities at Marshall. But yeah, that networking piece, going back to that, yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. We're going to take it back a little bit. Like, so
Hmm.
I know you mentioned that you were interested potentially being a doctor. And what kind of got you to being in aerospace? What does your childhood look like? What inspired you? What like brought you into this space realm that we live in now?
My family, like you mentioned in the intro, we are immigrants to the United States. And when I was, around 5, we moved my dad was doing his PhD at University of Alabama, Birmingham. He did a postdoc in Missouri. And so we moved around a little bit. He was a PhD student, and I couldn't provide for a family today on a PhD student budget. So I'm so thankful for him to do that. But, at the time we kind of didn't know anyone in this new country, and it was my brother, my mom and dad, and my brother, he had this interest in astronomy, and he's been a really big influence in my life, and so he would drag our family to the planetarium all the time. And as a female, we're conditioned to have different interests. So I loved Barbies, I still love the color pink, but those interests were introduced to me because of my brother. The planetarium was something free to do for our family, and we would go quite often. It was to the Jackson, Mississippi Planetarium. And, I just realized that there's this whole world of aerospace and astronomy. And then my father was a medical doctor in Bangladesh, but then he came to the United States to get his PhD, not MD. And pursued like this field of academia and public health. And so he had this medical background that really, whether you call it brainwashing, but I thought everything he did was absolutely fascinating. So we would learn like human bones in the body when I was like doing my addition, subtraction, math workbooks, like at the
That's so
same time,
cute.
in the same vein. And so, those interests kind of grew from those influences in my life. And then once I got into high school, I joined the robotics team, and that's when the concept of engineering was first really introduced to me. And I had this physics teacher in high school, Miss Sappington, and she absolutely, believed in me. And again, it was that female mentorship that really got me through to my final interest. And I was almost going to pursue astrophysics or something like that. I fell in love with her physics class, but then she kind of pointed me towards aerospace engineering. She's like, you love this engineering stuff. You also are a space nerd. So why don't you go pursue this program at Mississippi State? I think it'll be perfect for you. That's what I did. And I'm so glad and thankful for that type of mentorship, because
Yeah.
otherwise, like, I don't know. I'd probably
Yeah.
be, in the world of astrophysics or in the medical field right now. So.
Right, right. It's wild how like our mentorships can really influence us in our development as like from childhood to being
Exactly.
teenagers and then like young adults and everything. So that's really cool. So you think that maybe like being on the robotics team really kind of was a pivotal moment for you, right? Like in putting you on the trajectory of aerospace engineering, maybe.
Yeah. I think it realized like the creativity behind engineering, because as a female who with an older brother, like as a little sister, I just innately wanted to hate everything my brother liked. I wanted to
Right.
do the complete
Yep,
opposite.
I
And so,
understand.
anything that had to do with like building stuff or like
Right.
putting Legos together, like those were the concepts of engineering that I had. It wasn't really anything attainable. But on the robotics team, I saw a servo controlling, it's something as simple as like a servo just controlling a wheel. And that really put context to like building, it was, it's like the electrons that move across that actually end up driving the whole system. Like
Right.
you can control those things, and that is like in itself a creativity.
I know for me personally, like being in the creative space is really important. And it was a huge
Yeah.
driver to me being an engineer because I finally got to understand the connection of how being involved in, like, say, art in the arts, like
Hmm.
theater and stuff, kind of helped
Hmm.
influence me later on in my career. Do you think, because, there's a big movement of putting A into STEAM, so involving the arts into
Yeah.
STEM. Do you find value in that? Like, do you think that the arts has made you a better engineer?
300%. Yes, include arts in STEM. STEAM is what it should be called. I believe there's this like innate piece of engineering and building and creating that is art. And when you create something that is both art, it is useful, it almost becomes a magical device. And
Yeah.
and so
I just got chills.
yeah, and so that's like something that this book, he's a professor out of the media lab at MIT, and I've been, listening to it on the audiobook, but he's super motivating in the way he describes magical, I think he calls them like magical devices, or, it's almost enchanting is what it's called, enchanting objects. And so that concept of an object being enchanting, so intuitive, and there's an art element to it, a design aspect to it, a usability, a human aspect to it. When all of those things come together and you create an enchanting device, you never have to think about it. And that's when like an engineering object is really useful. He uses the clock as an example. A clock is so easy to use, right? You don't ever have to think twice about it. And they're beautiful. They're used as, art pieces on your wall. And
Sure.
so I don't know, that's just a concept that introduces, the concept of art to me. That book has really been kind of driving that idea home for me. But yeah, absolutely. I love to do makeup. We watch RuPaul's Drag Race together,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we love to costume. That's one of our like friendship things we like to do
Yeah.
together. And all of those things, we love enjoy those things because we like to create, and we like to build things, and it's like a
And challenge
creation of
ourselves in
yeah.
a creative
Right.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, and so engineering is exactly that. It's like challenging yourself in a creative space, but your tool sets are a little different, right? Your tool
Right.
sets are math, your tool sets are coding, your tool sets are the books that you have to reference to, define an orbital trajectory. Yeah, it's just a
That's
different
so
type of
cool.
creating. Yeah.
I know like you were also involved in like pat in the pageant scene, right?
Oh yeah, that
There
part too.
in Yeah, well, so like, obviously there's a little there's creativity in that when,
hmm
and thinking in that space. And I'm sure a lot of people don't necessarily equate engineering with pageant world, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about your experience in pageantry, but also how how you've honed that experience to assist you in your at being an engineer.
I have a whole TED talk on that.
I know you do.
But yeah.
Link that in the video description for sure.
Yeah, link below. But the so gosh, I was just talking to my brother about this. So as a principal investigator of my project of the PI, that many of my tasks are communicating what the team is doing to management and to the general public, and in a moment's notice all the time. And gosh, so yeah, the pageant world, just as a background, I competed in Miss Mississippi and Miss USA, and under the Miss Universe organization. And that process was about, I would say, like, took about like 5 years of my life, from like training and competing and trying. That was throughout like probably my senior year of high school, throughout undergrad. And the skill sets I learned there are, in a pageant, in Miss USA competition, you have your interview, you have swimsuit, evening gown, but beyond that, you are an ambassador for your state for the entire year. You're traveling, going to different, appearances is what they're called, and you give speeches. And so there's a lot of responsibility in just like speaking. And so communication was a huge thing that impacted my career today. As a PI, like I mentioned, speaking, regurgitating pretty much your entire, like, it's like giving like a 1 minute thesis dissertation or something in
Right.
a, immediately at all times. And so I think being able to boil down my aerospace experiences during a pageant interview with the judges. Those interviews, we've had different formats, but there's like 3 minute round robin interviews where you only have 3 minutes to introduce yourself to a judge. And that it's a difficult task. And
Yeah,
so
right.
that really helped a lot, and drive a lot of what I do at work today in the communication piece. I guess the other big thing is just the determination and perseverance that it takes, to be able to
Right.
train yourself to that level of, almost like an athlete in a sense. And so similarly in aerospace, it's so complex. Some of the things you do, you have to have, that dedication and drive to be able to train your brain, and train yourself as an engineer. And so there's a lot of parallels there, and definitely wouldn't have thought that like my pageant career would have impacted me so much today at work. But every single thing I do, I'm just like, man, I already did that once. And
Yeah,
also,
right.
like, I make a joke in the talk. I mention, like, if you're on national television in a bikini, like, not much else scares you. I totally mean that. Like,
I can imagine. Well, let me say, I can't imagine, but
it's
that
like,
sounds terrifying to me.
yeah, so it's like, what else can be that scary after that? But
So I know, like, obviously in the pageant world, you have to think about how you present yourself and like your attitude, your how you dress and how you look, and how you represent your state and how you talk, how you speak to others and answer questions. Do you feel that because of your background in pageantry and because you learned these skills in the professional world or even in internships, did you ever struggle with like sexism in the workplace because you were feminine, because you are somebody who taught me not to be afraid of my femininity, you know? And I
yeah.
think that you've always held very tight to that piece of who you are
Hmm.
and never allowed the stereotypical, like, male dominated industry to drive how you speak to others or how you dress. Do you have like stories or like examples of like situations you've been through where you have experienced sexism in the workplace and just because of how you dressed or how you acted, things like that?
There's a lot of things we could call my experiences, and I think sexism is one of them, absolutely. I think there's also just like this some more like nuanced things I've experienced that I think are just like misunderstandings or prejudgment or
Yeah.
just kind of notions that like maybe I'm the secretary instead of the
Right.
engineer.
Yep.
So that's one thing that happens often. I always
Right.
have to say like I'm so and so, I do this, at the forefront whenever I'm like at work or in my past
Establishing
internships.
establishing
Yeah,
your CV before, like, so that they
yeah, it's just
understand who you
like,
are.
hey, I'm the lab manager. Like we
Right.
had like an emergency situation the other day, and I went downstairs, and I look young also. Like I'm kind of like shorter in stature, and my hair looks like I look like this at work usually. And so like I always do my hair and makeup because it makes me feel put together, and it's just makes
And
me
it's
feel.
empowering too, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I also just really enjoy fashion and
Right.
love makeup. If I could have another career, it would be as a makeup artist. Um, and so I, you know, the way that you look when you're the only one, I'm usually the only woman in the room in a lot of spaces, but then on top of that, I'm usually the most glam woman in a room and probably one of the more younger people in the room as well. There's, always the misconception of like who is that person because she looks very different and just out of place out of all of these men in the room. So there's that constant just like reintroduction of myself that I have to give, which is exhausting. But then there's like in the past, I've had people look over my CV before I got my dream job, and they were like, "Why don't you just like take this pageant stuff off?" And I was like, "Well, I was like literally an ambassador to a state, and I did
Right.
so much with it. Like, I don't want to hide that part of myself, but there've been almost like a 50-50 response to that part of my life. Like, maybe you should not bring that up because it doesn't have anything to do with your technical skills." And I was like, "Well, communicating your technical ability is a huge piece of your technical works. I'm going to keep it there." And I did. And, I will continue to, always highlight that piece of my life because it did teach me so much. It's literally who I am. It defined me.
Right.
With that piece, I have like, just a lot of pushback. I've had pushback from like intern mentors in the past and managers that have asked me to take that off my resume. I just quite frankly won't.
I get the same thing with King of the Nerds. People are always like, "Why do you keep this reality competition on your resume?" And I'm like, "Because I learned from it. I grew from this experience,
Yeah, and
kind of
it's like
thing."
everything from not even just the experience. It's like you learn things about production and cameras
Right.
that
Right.
that in itself is a science. So like,
Yeah.
granted, like that's a little bit of a reach, but still, like it's beyond just like the tangible skills. For instance, I had to do a video demo like of our whole team and like produce a video to be able to get the funding path for my dream project. And like
Oh
I
man.
wouldn't have known how to produce a good video had it not been like watching a live production on international television.
Right.
That helps with that. It's like make sure the lighting is good, make sure this is good. And you're doing the same with your YouTube channel, which I think I deviated from your question, but sexism in the workplace, absolutely. I've had moments and instances where, things have had to be elevated, which is unfortunate, but I'm also super hopeful for just the difference between our year in aerospace engineering, how there was, I think, like 6 women in the room of 80.
Yep. Yep.
And then looking at by the time we graduated, our freshman class, I think there was like far more. It was almost like 30 to
Hmm.
40%. I think that gives me hope. And, we just have to be, we're on the kind of like the cusp of
That change.
that change. And being on the cusp of that change is exhausting because you have to be the person taking a lot of, the impacts and the blows. But, what gives me hope is the upcoming generation and having these conversations and, like really pushing through that, I guess, gap in women in STEM and minorities in
Right.
STEM and femme in STEM. So, oh, did
Yeah.
I just come up with something? Femme in STEM.
Look at you. Yeah, that's a wonderful point. And that kind of brings up another topic is like, so I know like the past 5 years have been like really rough for immigrants in America. Have you had to overcome that? And I know in like not just in the last 5 years, but throughout your entire life, right? Like going
Yeah.
through white male dominated industry or just a white male dominated world, right? So like what
Yeah.
how like I know that has to have been a struggle, like, and
Mhm.
how have you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's like two pieces of this because that's the industry I work in, is very white male. But then there's also growing up in Mississippi was another big piece of it because there weren't any Bangladeshi people really around me. One thing I'm going to caveat this whole conversation with is that I'm very, I guess you would say, white passing. I also am, I use my makeup and hair and my looks, if you will, as a
Hmm.
way to kind of bridge that gap where, when
Hmm.
people meet me, they still think that I'm like, I look a certain way, I look, very polished or put together or whatever, and I think that helps the situation always. But growing up, I didn't have hair and makeup, didn't have a title like Miss Mississippi USA and things that would define my space in society. My earliest memories were, I was in the principal's office all the time in elementary school because I didn't understand that people in South Mississippi, like I didn't understand how big Christianity was. And so I would tell people that my family is Hindu, like I had never been to a church. Or I think one of the first questions that, back in the day people would ask is, what church do you go to?
Yep,
It's still a thing.
100%. It's still a thing.
What church do you go to? And I was like, Iskan Valley Wonder Temple. Like, it's like, they don't know who that is.
Well, at
Career,
least you had an
Mississippi.
answer.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was literally like a Hare Krishna temple because it's like one of the only things I could find, our family could find in Mississippi, that was
Right.
closer to us. Our family is Hindu Bengali, and so that like piece, the religion piece was really big because I had principals that were trying to convert me in those
Right.
moments where like someone would tell on me that I wasn't Christian. I would go to the principal's office because I was in trouble for not being Christian. And then they would ask, the principal would ask me and like try to have like a revelation or something with me.
That's
And
wild.
that was weird. And I
That's such
just
a
kind of
that's
grew
such a
up with
breach
that.
of like that's nuts. That's I didn't know that piece. That's all that's crazy.
Yeah, right. And
Oh.
so there was that kind of race piece. But then, in the workplace, I'm also very lucky that Indian people or like Desi people or South Asian people in general, I'm not Indian, I'm Bengali, but a lot of people can classify me as Indian because it's same area, or they do. And so they see people just in the STEM world have a really good reputation. It's like a lot
Mhm.
of Indian doctors,
Mhm. Mhm.
engineers. And so I do feel like I get some trust in that way that I'm just like a South Asian girl. But, it's really like I think the femme piece that for me has been a struggle. There are like, I think people disconnecting with my culture and never understanding it. That's just something that has always been there, and I've kind of accepted as a norm, which probably isn't healthy. And so that piece, like someone like making an Indian accent and saying something to me, it's like, okay, dude, that's yeah, played out, but it's also really racist. I've been the brunt of like all of those terrorist jokes, all of the you smell bad jokes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just an ongoing thing that always
Thing.
happens. And
Yeah.
people think it's funny and lighthearted, but it's not when it's coming from someone not of my
Right.
race. So
Right. And I wonder, I'm glad like conversation has started to turn to call that kind of like that kind of speech out more
mhm.
often. Do you feel like people are calling those kind of things out more? Are you witnessing that? Or is it more of like you still think that like while you see positive, there's still a long, long way to go for
Yeah.
the industry?
Um, I think, yeah, like vocabulary police and just like the way our, like having a tumultuous presidency in the last 4 years and, the BLM movement has really driven these
Conversation.
conversations and defined what is and isn't okay. And today, in this conversation, in this moment in time, we have, the Asian hate
Yep.
crimes that are happening across the
Yep.
United States. That's impacted me. Like the other night, my family's still in South Mississippi and they're always experiencing hate. I watch it happen all the time, like when they're on a phone call, when they have rental properties. Those exchanges are very racist. And so I had a nightmare the other day that my family was a victim of a shooting of an Asian discriminatory shooting, and it just, you know, it was on my heart for like a whole week. Like, this is
Mm,
totally
hmm.
possible. It's in South
Hmm.
Mississippi. They're
Yeah.
exposed to so many people in the community. That's so much a reality. So that in itself was exhausting and it still is exhausting. So I don't think we are like really at a point where we're making any changes. And I
Right.
think now, the the presidency has shifted, which gives me hope, but we really need to put our legislation where we need to match now how we're policing our language and
Right.
we need to match that with policy. I think we've got a long way to go, especially for the Black community, as well as, the hate crimes that are possible because of our laissez-faire gun laws in this country.
Right.
So,
For
yeah,
sure. For sure.
I think we've got a lot of work to do, but I do appreciate that, people get called out now
Yeah, I
for that
know.
kind of language, which is awesome,
Right.
which
It's
is
always
really
good to
good.
call it out. And I think that like, I think that's a driving force because the more you see others calling it out, the more I think others feel comfortable calling it out too. So it's kind of like all of
Yeah.
us helping each other out. I do agree we definitely have a long, long way to go.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
100%.
so I know that was probably like a heavier topic.
That's okay. I don't like I don't like small talk.
I know. Well, so like, we have known each other for like 10 years plus. I don't want to date us. I guess like what is one of your fondest memories in because like we obviously have gone through some good there were great times, there were awful times. Let's talk about some like positive like memories that you might have from your time in that aerospace. Like was there any like project that you worked on that was really like inspiring or was there a funny moment that like made you realize like I think I picked the right path? Like
Yeah.
what is do you have anything like that?
Well, I'm gonna let the whole community know you're my best friend and you're my maid of honor for my wedding that's coming up. Like,
Hey.
absolutely, you mean the world to me. So going
Aw.
through aerospace with you was the best thing ever. Like, could you imagine not having a best girlfriend doing that? Because
No, no, absolutely not.
there was
Like
no one else.
no, having you in my life during that time was so important for my personal growth and development, and like just having you to lean on who understood what I was going through too. Like it was so
Right.
important.
And everything, at the time, I know people that go through med school who have very like similar bonds, but I think
Hmm.
aerospace engineering was a little bit less competitive than med school, and it's just like
Okay.
everyone getting together trying to solve these hard problems that there is no Chegg for. Like you can't go
Right.
online and
Yep.
find
You
the
can't Google
solutions.
that.
No, and you can't like we have like Brune, that aerospace flight mechanics book, or was it the instructors book? I can't remember
It's right
what it's
there. It's on
called.
my bookshelf. Yep.
Flight mechanics instructors, I think, and that book
Yep.
is like worth like $1,300. But
Yep.
that it has like all of these problem sets that no answer solution to, and it's
Yep.
just like our professors like go figure it out. So we have that just awesome group of friends, our Era buddies, and
Yep.
we're all still so close. And whenever I realized how everyone in that group, how much everyone meant to me, and I reflected on it probably while I was doing Miss USA. I was away from you all a lot, and one the
Hmm.
thing that I missed the most was the Era buddies. And so like
Hmm.
just those moments where I would like reflect and think about how awesome our friend group was. We did the aerospace senior cruise, which was really fun. That was a big, huge memory that I have. I think one of my favorite memories, though, with you specifically, is when we
Yeah.
lived together at Darby.
Yep. Old
And
Darby.
our cute little house next to a cow farm.
Yeah.
Um, I loved that house so much, but it was the summer where my mom came over right before
I
Miss
remember this.
USA. So Miss
Yep.
USA was in June, I believe, and
Yep.
you were going to King of the Nerds
Yep. To
and
film for that.
to
Yep.
film for that. And so that was the same exact summer. And my mom came in and she's like, "It's just something about this house. It's just, it's just a
There's
lucky."
something about this house.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just think about that, like that moment when she said that, I was like, wow, like Kate's doing this, I'm doing this, we're aerospace girls. Like it was just such a moment of like, wow, we worked so hard and we
Yep.
still are working our asses off to do all of this. And
Right.
so that was just that whole experience with you, you know, was awesome. And I think is what makes
Right.
us like so close today.
For
So,
sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think like, a lot of people thought in college that you and I put too many eggs in our basket, right? Like I think a lot of
yes.
people, like I know Mr. Hannigan specifically was like, Mary Kate, you put too many eggs in your basket. And I just, I was reflecting on that recently and I realized that, yeah, we might have put too many eggs in one basket, but we learned how to juggle that. We learned how to distribute the weight. We learned, yeah, we had our missteps here and there, and we
Yep.
had our struggles along the way. But I think though it in the end of the day, it really kind of made us better engineers because we had those experience in missteps. We had our experiences in failures because if you had it easy breezy through college, the real life isn't like that.
Nope.
You're gonna be met with really hard problems, really challenging things that you have to think outside the box, and you can't let a failure completely stop what you're doing or what you're working
Yeah.
for. So I think, yeah. So I think it
Yeah,
was
no,
so
100%.
important. Well, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I think like putting your eggs in, my piano teacher would also tell me that all the time in high school, like you just do too many things. And I think like as women, like we innately want to do that, Maybe that's maybe too much of a general statement, but I feel like the pressure to have to do a lot of things, I think,
Oh yeah.
just for instance, like our AIAA chapter. I think we both were presidents of that. And every year it was a woman from aerospace. But I feel like we felt the responsibility of like, there's these intangible things like the emotional maturity of rallying a room together and getting everyone's food for a meeting or something like that. It was those little bitty details that we feel like is our responsibility as the only woman in the room or something like that. Like we're just doing too many things and trying to you know, be the bomb or something like
Right,
that.
right. It's
Yeah.
like we always feel like we have to over exceed just to be like considered average, if that makes sense. Like there's no such thing as middle of the road. We have to be like we have to be
Yeah.
the best at what we do, and we feel like we have to be out there shining to even to feel like we're good enough, right? And it's so
Yeah.
messed up. It's such a messed up mentality. That's what we're
Yeah.
here. We're
I've
here to
been trying
bust
to,
that mentality.
yeah, reel back that kind of stuff at work. Like, I don't
Same.
volunteer for like extra stuff. I'm just like, I gotta get this project done. And so I
Right,
think I've
right.
learned a little bit, but
Yeah.
definitely it's just a personality trait of ours.
So we're gonna wrap it on up here. Is there anything like you
Yeah.
want to plug, or is like where can people find out more about you and your work, or is there like any socials you want to plug?
Yeah, so I use Instagram a lot. On that Instagram today, it will be very like bridal. We've got a wedding coming up this year. Um,
Yes.
I'm also, as you know, we're moving back on site due to COVID. I plan to use it for more work-related things and outreach-related things. Thank you, Kate, for the opportunity because this is definitely like my first delve into the STEM communication platforms. And I'm so
Yeah.
proud of you for holding this YouTube channel and for doing all that you're doing for the STEM community. So my Instagram handle is Paramita_Mitra. We'll tag it, I imagine, below. That's usually where I'm communicating a lot.
Awesome. Well, Paramita, thanks so much for joining me on my very first Delta V podcast. I am so excited to delve into this world with you and hear and share your story throughout your college career and your professional career in life. And please stay tuned later for more content from Delta V channel. And we will have our Patreon up and running. So go and take a check out and at that. We'll have all of our socials down below. So if you like this, hit subscribe and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, cool.